Thank you for joining us for Green Status Pro's Conflict Minerals Automation Buyer's Guide and Trends for 2015 webinar. I am John Logan, CEO of Green Status Pro, and I'm very excited and pleased so many of you have joined us today. We're going to take a unique approach to conflict minerals automation, and we're going to look at it through the Six Sigma lens. As I'm sure you know, the Six Sigma approach is to identify the weakest required task in a process, improve it, and then repeat. Conflict Minerals Automation provides a cost-effective and repeatable governance process for 3TG data collection, verification, and reporting. Evaluating automation from a Six Sigma process improvement perspective has provided us with new insights into what's required for conflict minerals automation. Now, our ground rules today internally are that while Green Status Pro is a conflict minerals automation supplier, our objective is for this presentation to be objective. So no suppliers, including Green Status Pro, are directly referenced during the presentation. We're going to start today's session with a review of several key issues and the way they are currently trending. When you and I talk one-on-one, these are usually the issues we start with to make sure we are on the same page. This discussion will provide us with the background setting required for the buyer's guide portion of the webinar, which will follow. Now, if you've got questions, please submit them, and we'll try and provide them real time. We're monitoring them, and we'll probably try to get them to the supplier at this point in time. If it's not possible, we'll wait till the presentations are complete, and we'll answer the questions at that time. Now, of course, you want the presentation. It will be emailed to you by tomorrow. Thank you again, and let's start with discussing the trends that we see. And the first trend and the first question we always have is, hey, is conflict minerals reporting going away? And our response is, no, it's not. Why? There's three pieces of evidence that we look at. The first is the violence in the region. And the violence in the region has changed, transformed, but it's not going away. We now are finding that gold mines in the eastern DRC are reportedly now raising the majority of the militia group's funding. So while certain areas have slowed down and aren't being as violent, it still has violence in the eastern region. The second area is the SEC's, is Dodd-Frank 1502 going to go away? Well, there's two ways it could go away, courts or legislation. The courts are only determining if the language requirement for filing is appropriate or not. And at the legislative level, look, there's a lot of fights to be picked, but changing the humanitarian objectives of Section 1502 is not one that's currently high on the list for change. Then the third area is publicity. And when we look at the NGOs, Intel is a leader in this area, and other activist groups, it's not going away. And in fact, when we look at the star power with the media, Ben Affleck, Aaron Rodgers, we continue to see the conflict minerals reporting and the humanitarian requirements are in the forefront. And let's just make sure we understand the court clarification issue. It gets garbled so many times. The court upheld a regulation requiring the country of origin product labeling be compelled on the meat industry. But the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals decided previously that not been found to be DRC conflict-free is compelled speech that violates the First Amendment. That's what the SEC is appealing. There are no other court cases, so the actual reporting is going to be required. Only the language of what's in the report might be modified. And then another question that's come up consistently is, what about the European Union? I mean, the European Union issued a directive stating conflict minerals reporting is voluntary, where there had been an expectation they were going to come up with legislation making it mandatory. And the EU is debating whether to pass a conflict minerals law. But quite frankly, what we have found, as usual, the European Union has found the U.S. is always there when they need us, and they're very happy to rely on Dodd-Frank Section 1502. So what we find is, from the buyer's perspective, the EU at this point is a non-issue. They're there, but it's Dodd-Frank 1502 is the real rule. And then we see the IPSAs, the increased pressures to have more data and documentation to get ready for the transition period winding down and going away. And what we find is that more conflict minerals filers conduct their IPSAs they're going to be pushing their suppliers to also conduct audits, also to make sure the data is correct, also make sure that they can rely on the statements going forward. So the IPSAs are going to increase the requirement for conflict minerals automation, increase the requirement for documentation, increase the requirement to do it right. And next we look at the CFSI. The CFSI has become the de facto standard in this industry. Ever since the Department of Commerce said it literally could not handle the smelter issue, it could not find which reported smelters were legit and which weren't, and gave it over to the CFSI has become even more important. And now what's going to happen is they're going to update the CMRTs throughout 2015. And if we look at what happened from version 301 to 302, it added quite a bit of turmoil in the reporting world. Made many reports inaccurate going forward because it was so drastic by adding a net 62 smelters, changing names, removing firms. Well, you know the whole story going forward. We think there'll be less volatility in the standard smelter list going forward, but we're still going to see changes. And one major area of changes is the ability to remove company names to replace them with multiple facilities. So for example, if we see our friends at HC Stark Group in Tantalum, that name was removed, but it was replaced by 7 CFSI compliant facility level smelters. The point we're making is that it's going to be difficult going forward as a trend to do the accurate reporting of conflict minerals smelter information. Just as it has been in the past, it's going to be difficult going forward. Again, a reason for automation. Now that being the trends, how are we going to do it? Well, I'm going to turn this over to Jack to take a look at conflict minerals automation, the buyer's guide through the lens of Six Sigma. Jack, all yours. Start by telling us what you think conflict minerals automation is.
Thanks, John. Conflict minerals automation is a system that a company will employ to help support the 3 aspects of conflict minerals reporting: RCOI, which is reasonable country of origin, due diligence, and documentation. This software needs to be available at all times to provide the documentation for audits. Because of these audits, it must be able to automate the documentation specifically for Section 1502. The only way you can automate is for the data to be on a single platform together. This has to be amenable to fit in with a company's goals, which are unique to every company. So looking at how conflict minerals automation relates to RCOI, this system, whether it be software or service, needs to help enable the rapid communication with suppliers and customers. This is done by validating your supplier's data, consolidating that data, and aggregating their declarations, while providing the analytics you need to report to your customers on your supply chain. In case a customer requests evidence on your due diligence, you need to be able to provide them of documentation of what you have done for due diligence with your suppliers. Now let's go to what the due diligence actually means. What are you doing to ensure your RCOI is reasonable? The system you use must be audit friendly, easy to put data in, and easy to get reports out of. You always want to start with a system that provides you with an editable template. This gives you a basic framework of the tasks you need to do and step-by-step instructions. But again, because you want it to fit in with your company's goals, it needs to be easily editable and able to be changed on the fly with minimal IT involvement. You need to document the entire process with step-by-step instructions that allow a responsible authority to provide the documentation and evidence of how tasks are completed. With this due diligence, you'll be able to have the documentation on file to meet an SEC examination. Have you ever sat through an SEC examination? It's not a fun process. They're looking for data and any way to find any issues with your data. That's why you need to make sure you have a secure system that can control the data integrity, provide immediate access to records, and provide you with who did what, when. You need to be able to store all forms of data on this service so it can be pulled down and read by an SEC examiner or an auditor. So at the end of the day, A conflict minerals automation software will allow you to perform smarter compliance and get better results. You want to be able to accomplish more with less. By increasing the accuracy of your data, you'll be able to decrease the cost of your conflict minerals program. And you need to look at it at supply chain transparency and accountability and auditability as a self-sustaining process. The more you put into one, the more you're going to get out of the other. When I look at the need for accuracy in conflict minerals, Six Sigma techniques are the first thing that come to mind for helping process improvement, specifically with accuracy in mind. One of the fundamentals of Six Sigma techniques is using a define, measure, analyze and improve, and control workflow. This workflow, also known as DMAIC, I've applied it to conflict minerals programs. The define phase was set when Dodd-Frank 1502 was passed. You know what the requirements are. For filers, they have an idea of they know what they're doing with their filings, and they have the expectations set for their suppliers who have to pass this data throughout their supply chain. Most companies started out, or all companies started out going into a measure phase, where they had to scope out their supplier base and get their initial conflict minerals data. As many of you know, once you got that data, you needed to begin to analyze and improve that data a lot. So then you can consolidate it and pass it on to your customers. And finally, the end goal, where I don't think anybody is yet, we know nobody is at, is the control phase. This is at the point where conflict minerals is not an active process. It is passive. You will update your data as your suppliers make changes to their data, and you'll be able to adapt on the fly to any industry changes, any industry standard changes. So when we look at finding your perfect solution, we want to break it down these phases and discuss the goals of each phase you will have in mind. And with these goals in mind, what are some of the best practices when looking at a software service for conflict minerals automation? And then once we have stated all those, we'll go over a vendor evaluation of what we see are the types of conflict minerals automation styles that are currently in the marketplace and how you can use them to benefit your program. So to begin, most of you guys have already gone through the measure phase, and you have three main goals in terms of identifying your active supplier list, which again, that is different than actually contacting all your 3TG suppliers. You need to find out the list of purchasing suppliers you purchase from is typically smaller than that list, as these lists are not actively updated. Once you have found the active supplier list, you need to find contacts within those companies to get the conflict minerals data. And again, there is no conflict minerals hotline you can go to. It's a process of finding the right contact. Once you've found them, and for many companies that use contract manufacturers, you do have to prove you're a customer. A lot of companies do not want to give this data away to just anybody that asks. This all builds up and takes more and more time to actually measure out and map out your supply chain. Once you get to the analyze and improve phase and you've gotten your smelter data, you realize that there are a lot of either missing or incomplete declarations. You need to be able to sort through this data, identify which declarations are missing, which are incomplete, and tell your suppliers they need to fix this. So you can be able to have a complete map of your supply chain. During this process, you'll need to also identify your high-risk suppliers that are either non-compliant or unknowingly purchasing 3TGs from the DRC region and who are buying from smelters that are not part of the CFSP audit program. And eventually, the end goal is getting to a control phase where you have conflict minerals reporting excellence. You want to be able to deliver accurate reports, respond quickly to customer requests and changes to that your suppliers make to their supply chain and all run at a low resource bandwidth. You also want to make sure you are ready for any changes in, say, the CFSI standard smelter list. Any industry changes you want to be able to adapt to and keep running, again, at a low cost. So now we've covered the goals of all three phases. Let's talk about some best practices that if you're in a specific phase, you should specifically look at when evaluating vendors. For the measure phase, to remind you guys, we want to identify, contact, and receive initial CMRTs from suppliers. There are two typical approaches that many companies take. The first is engaging with a consulting firm to scope out their 3TG supply chains. The cost of consultants, however, can make these services unsustainable, and at some point, you're going to have to bring this to an internal team. You don't want to get set back a few months' worth of work building in an internal team and transferring all that knowledge over. So start with an internal team to reach out to your supplier base. Gather those initial CMRTs. When you are looking for conflict minerals automation, you want to find a service or software that helps you reach out to that supplier base and then allows you to provide rapid turnaround with that data or with data analysis, so you can go back and give them the feedback to get the level of accuracy you're looking in for your conflict minerals reports. And again, when you are doing this, think about the data format. We think you should focus on a CFSI supported format. You don't want to use a proprietary format that, say, if you switch the solution you're using, you have to completely change over all your data, because that can easily set you back another few months worth of work. In the analyze and improve phase, it's really about rapid turnaround. Again, you want to correct missing and inaccurate data from your supplier's CMRTs. And in order to do that, you need to do it quickly to keep them engaged and make sure that your feedback is actually meaningful. If you wait more than 2 weeks, either the supplier may have forgotten you, changed their data, or a standard could have changed, making your feedback meaningless. The only way to do that is to automate the validation of your CMRTs. This will be the largest bottleneck within your conflict minerals program. It can take up to many hours to just go through one supplier CMRT and find all the issues and aggregate all the data. By having a software solution that, again, can run through it and give you the feedback immediately, you're able to work with your suppliers to get that accuracy level up. And by doing so, you want to also be able to instantly generate reports using this latest CFSI's latest standard smelter compliance list. What you lose in the CMRTs is the actual status of these smelters. They don't put it in the CMRTs, and you have to use manual methods typically to look up what the statuses are. You may know you have 100 smelters in your supply chain, but how easy is it for you to find whether or not they're actually sourcing from the DRC, or if they're compliant and actively trying not to source from these conflict zones? So again, by doing this and knowing you have, eventually you should be able to get to a point where you have 100% conflict-free smelters in your supply chain. And that'll take you to a control phase. And that's the end goal. I mean, the only companies right now that I could say are in the control phase are the label printing companies that have no conflict minerals in their supply chain, and they're just putting in no, 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 and they don't have to make any changes. But they're the only ones at this point. Right now, everybody's still trying to get up to that level of accuracy that allows them to, again, report accurately, quickly, and keep the program going at a low cost. So here's where we recommend you really need to look at a software solution. This will help you control your costs. And again, when you look at the software, focus on the simplicity. It's not going to be something that's going to be used by somebody every day. You need to make sure that you can get into the system, you can put data in, get information out, and not have to worry about relearning software. And again, when you're looking at the software too, if you're not using it as often, you want to be able to adapt to the latest CFSI standards. As the CFSI changes its standard smelter list, you want it to be able to help you get that list up, your smelter list up to date as soon as possible. Find the errors and bring it all up. So now that we've covered the best practices for all three phases, we want to look at what vendors are offering at the moment in the marketplace. There are dozens of vendors, each with different solutions, with different unique features, but we've been able to really look at it and boil down these solutions into 4 categories. The first, we have environmental database solutions, product lifecycle management systems, governance, risk, and compliance systems, and CFSI CMRT automation. To go through, let's start with environmental database solutions. These are good public data exchanges that are commonly used for many material regulations. It allows customers and suppliers to share data with each other and be able to roll it up into reports. The issue you have with this, as it is a public data exchange, you're not going to get the data validation and the management specifically that you're going to see in CMRTs, that are necessary to help sort through missing and inaccurate data. These database solutions typically come in proprietary formats, so the data you enter will not follow an industry standard, and so in getting data out of the system can become burdensome. Product life cycle management systems are typically owned by engineering departments, and they offer conflict minerals extensions to help try and map refinery to the part or the product. Again, the issue you see with these is while it is trying to map a part to a product, it doesn't have the ability to read the CMRT data the way you want it to actually truly map it out and give you any validation issues. And it won't be designed to be updated quickly with the way the CFSI is changing it, at the rate the CFSI is changing its standards. Governance, risk, and compliance systems got a big start when Sarbanes-Oxley was passed, and financial groups needed to start having tighter controls within the company. These systems are looking at the policies put in place and assessing the level of risk with those policies to you being exposed. And while they're typically meant for an audit or controller department, the issue you have is with the CMRTs and conflict minerals and specifically is it the amount of data that you need to process and push through. It is not designed to handle. It'll be able to tell you if the policies that you're putting in for your RCOI, whether they will be effective, ineffective, or leave you up for any attacks, but they don't have the ability to actually look at the data and really give you the feedback you need. And finally, CFSI, CMRT reporting automation. Again, these systems are specifically designed to support the CFSI. They'll read, validate, and consolidate CMRT data and help give you the reports you need to help report to your customers and give you the feedback to your suppliers based on the data they've actually supplied. There are fewer, compared to PLMs or EDSs, they may have fewer supplier customer management features. But again, they are focused on the raw amount of data that you actually need to get to the accuracy level you're looking for with conflict minerals. So now that we've covered the 4 types of conflict minerals automation solutions, here are 4 major points that I like to bring up when you're evaluating a vendor. The big thing is you need to determine a vendor's operational level of support for the CFSI. While you always want version 3.02 CMRTs, and in a perfect world, and when going through this presentation, it seems like that is attainable, you're never going to get 100% version 3.02 CMRTs. You need to make sure that whatever software you have is going to be able to handle the range of CMRTs that are available and can help take that data and at least do something with it to bring it up to the latest standard, to help you bring it to the latest standard. It'll help simplify your reporting process and help deal with the percentage of suppliers that are less responsive and do not provide the updates you require. When you're going and talking to vendors, make sure you're getting live demos of their current production software. I've gone through and bought many software systems for companies, and we've had instances where certain vendors won't show their software live. There's a reason for that. It'll be too complicated. Setting it up will not be an easy process. If they can't show it to you live and make it understandable within an hour, then you're looking at a solution that's too complicated for what you need. Do not accept video recordings of demonstrations. Those will be canned, perfect scenarios, and that's not what you want. You want to see it live. You also do not accept promises of future features. You can't, in a sales meeting, they may say, we'll be able to put it in, until suddenly an engineering group says we can't put it in. You need to realize that what you're buying into may be what you're stuck with, and not have the features you need if they are promised for the future. When scheduling these meetings, ensure you can try as hard as you can to have all stakeholders within the Conflict Minerals program to have a chance to meet with the software service vendors. You want to make sure everybody's on the same page, that they're getting the same amount out of the program as you think you're going to get out of it, and they understand where the company's money is going to help the company with this reporting program. And on that same token, document how you see the solution fitting into your vision of your company's Conflict Minerals program. You need to make sure that the software will actually help you with your specific goals, not the goals that they want it to be, or the vendor wants. You want to make sure that you're able, if your focus is accuracy, if your focus is on a large scope, however you want it to be, you need to make sure that that solution will help enable that. To close out, we'll talk about the best practices from a Six Sigma perspective. Again, and these are basic project management tips that I always like to think of when starting a project, especially one as large as Conflict Minerals reporting. You need to ensure all departments have bought into the initiative. You don't want to get roadblocked, stalled by a group or a department that does not want anything to do with Conflict Minerals. You need to make sure everybody understands the importance of it. Everybody within the company understands the importance of it and is willing to help when necessary. You need to publish and execute an implementation plan. You need to make sure that you have accountability for who is supposed to do what when. You need to have specific dates of where you want to be at within the program. If those dates are slipped, you need to have reasons why and have those documented, so everybody is on the same page that it's not a failing program and you can brag about the successes. You need to remind your entire supply chain that the SEC will require you to drop non-responsive suppliers. Most suppliers have understood that they need to report on the Conflict Minerals in their supply chain, but there are some that still hold out. You need to threaten them with the loss of business to get them to begin to respond to you. And again, always require that your suppliers provide you their Conflict Minerals data in the latest CMRT release. At a certain point, you need to start rejecting those CMRTs, and CMRTs with missing data that you've given feedback to a supplier for. They need to update their stuff, their CMRTs, or reject the ones that are improperly filled out. And finally, the biggest point is market the benefits of your compliance automation initiative. Do it on your website. Tell them that you are doing great things and helping with Conflict Minerals, that you are not sourcing from conflict zones. Internally, on newsletters, blogs, emails, market the successes you have. You can do a great job, but doesn't matter if nobody in the company knows what you're doing. Bring that up in the sustainability policy of what you're doing with Conflict Minerals, that you're making it a priority and an effort. For filers, SEC Form SD is a great place to say, hey, we're using this system, it's set, and we're doing our best to make sure we are not buying from conflict zones. And the same thing with media communications. That's my presentation for the Buyer's Guide. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Jack. That was very informative, very different, very objective, I think. I think that gives the audience a very good perspective to begin looking at and taking a evaluation of vendors from their current phase of Conflict Minerals. Rob Kastmeyer, our president, has been here reviewing the questions that have come in. Rob, do you want to go through the list and give Jack and me the ones that you think?
Sure. I'm delighted to. Thanks. We've gotten some interesting questions, and I'm getting more now. Please just type them in so that we can put them into our list and ask John and Jack about their comments. So first, John, this one seems to be for you. We have not had any complaints from the SEC or our customers at this point. Why should we be doing anything differently than we have done?
Well, I think this is a great question. We hear this continuously, but note the phases we're going into. We're still in a phase right now where the SEC has not been able to put together its examination program. And they haven't done it because we're in a transition stage, and the SEC is allowing users to survive this transition stage. My background comes from the financial compliance perspective, where the SEC is in all the time. Let me assure you, everybody laughs about the SEC until the examiner shows up in your front lobby and says, "Hi, I've come to examine your books on the reports. Open them up now." And that's the way they tend to start. And after a while, they'll give you at least a week's notice, and they will not take it for an excuse there's a death in the family, let me assure you. They want to see your books, your documentation. It's all got to be in order. What we're trying to provide you with is this knowledge and input that you should start out and do the job properly on the documentation and the process, so when the SEC does come in, you're ready. Now, what happens when they come into your biggest customer and your biggest customer says, "Hey, did you support me properly?" Now when your customer's in panic, you're going to be in panic. So let me assure you, we're giving you the advice, do it right now. Do it properly. It's not going to take much more time. It's not even going to cost more. Do it properly, and you'll be ready for when the SEC examinations begin.
Okay, thank you, John. Here's another question I think is also for you, because it says, John, you talked about IPSAs, the audits, and frankly, we aren't planning one this year. We don't feel as though we are in a position to and are not required to, but we're debating about conducting a gap assessment or similar. What's best practice there? What should we be looking at? Any thoughts on that?
Well, this is the year you can practice. I love the term mock audit. We can go and do a mock audit with usually our financial auditors who are friends of the family, who can come in and take a look at our process, take a look at what we've done, and be able to provide us with that internal mock audit, and they can tell us what we need to do for next year. And why is this important? Well, by the time you've got the mock audit done, you're going to find that you have very little time to put in place the controls that you need to be able to be prepared for next year in 2016 when you have to do the IP. If you find that your 3 TGs are undeterminable, you are going to have an audit. And according to the SEC, 75% of the filers are going to have an IPSA next year. So it gives you time to be prepared. Listen, the best time to find out where you're weak is when you're not in short time, not in panic, and it's not the SEC that's doing it. This is the best time to get your mock audit so you can put your procedures in place for next year going forward. That's a best practice.
Okay, thank you. A bunch more questions here. Jack, this one is for you. We require 3.02s to be filled out, but we still have a lot of older versions that we're relying on, either because we haven't gotten newer ones in or some other reasons. I believe you indicated that that we should use an automation system that could bring say the version 3.02a CMRTs to a version 3.02. How is this done? I'm not aware of that. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, for the most part with these, a lot of these automation softwares that actually go into the CMRTs, what they do is they look at the data in it and relate it all back to basically a spreadsheet where it breaks it down and organizes it. Between version 2 and version 3 of the CMRTs, in terms of declarations, only a few questions were added, but none were taken away or modified enough to make the statements different between version 2. In terms of smelter data, what a lot of these automation softwares will do is they take the smelter list, or the smelters listed in a previous CMRT, and check it against the latest standard smelter list. While we say there's turmoil and there are a lot of smelters that get removed and names changed, they are able to either update the smelters based on the current standard smelter list and bring it in, and then reject smelters that have been either removed because they're no longer active, and note the fact that these smelters are no longer active and you can't report that you're getting metals from them because where are you actually getting them from? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, let's just make sure we understand this reference smelter list that's published by the CFSI in every edition of the CMRT is the public standard for what is a smelter as opposed to what is a sales office in Dubai, for example. That's what we're looking for an authority.
Okay, good. That looks good. And if there are follow-on questions, please type them in. John, this one seems to be for you, but it could also be in Jack's. Jack may have some thoughts on it as well, which is, what is your opinion about the efforts to automate smelter part documentation?
This is a good question. I mean, it would be great to be able to have a part or component part and be able to link it back to the smelter where the 3 TGs came from. And in certain situations, a very limited certain number of situations, it seems it may be possible to do that when you have very few levels of manufacturers between the smelter and the component itself. But when we start to look at the broad picture, we find quickly that if we look at the CMRT format, it really isn't designed for that. 90+% of those report at the corporate level going forward. And we find that if we were to try and get back to the part smelter, it's not going to work within the CMRT functionality. We have no alternative to that right now, and it's only going to occur in a minority of situations. So while it's an interesting exercise, it would be great. I think finally the last point I've got to make is, remember, we're talking about commodities here. Commodities means low cost. It means you're not going to try and burden commodities such as tantalum with reporting going forward with it. I believe that less than 5% of the conflict minerals or the 3TG reporting situations have any chance of having a smelter part linkage that's economically justifiable and that vendors and suppliers will go forward on. Jack, do you have any opinion on this?
Yeah, I have to agree with what John said there. It is important to note that there are a lot of suppliers, especially in the mid-tier, that are dealing with so many thousand parts that for them to maintain and keep up to date will essentially be the same CMRT for many of those parts, but still have to individually maintain it makes it unfeasible. And at the end of the day, too, what you see is a lot of companies that do ask for parts, or for CMRTs specifically to parts they buy. They'll get it from suppliers where if it's just a tin, if it's a part that just contains tin, they'll get a CMRT that says this is for your tin part, but also here's the gold refiners that we're putting in, because they're not actually, the suppliers aren't even taking the time to really break it down.
No, I've heard of one circumstance where somebody asked for the tin smelter and it was given a list of 80 potential tin smelters it could have come from. I mean, that's the reality of the lack of linkage from once you leave the smelter to get to the part.
Okay, this is another question that really is in Jack's bailiwick. Jack, how does the end of the transition period impact Conflict Minerals program automation?
Well, it definitely puts more importance on it. You need to get that accuracy up. You can't, at a certain point, say that we are conflict minerals indeterminable. You need to say either we believe there are conflict minerals in our products or we are conflict free. And the automation, again, that will go into the importance of the accuracy, analyzing and improving that data. You need to have that rapid turnaround with your suppliers to really get them to the point where, again, you are at or near 100% accuracy with that smelter data. So you can then determine, I know exactly where this supplier is getting all their materials from. Now, are these smelters compliant with the CFSI? Are these smelters and refiners not sourcing from the DRC? So it only is going to put more pressure and more importance on it once the transition period ends. And at the SEC filers at the bottom of the supply chain will need to actually make declarations about whether their products are conflict-free or not.
And that means that they'll have to have more and more pressure to have audited back through the whole chain back to the smelter. So that gets to be an interesting question about how far will they have the right to do what the SEC calls see-through. That is, from their Tier 1 suppliers to their Tier 1 suppliers back to end tiers to the smelter. Will that whole chain have to be documented appropriately to be able to say that we are sure that this mineral is conflict-free? Going to put a lot more pressure from that perspective on the filers and the reporting systems.
Okay, thank you. Here's another one for John, but Jack, you have some thoughts on that. We have historically used consultants for our Conflict Minerals program. How will Conflict Minerals program automation lower the cost of our company's IPSA and SEC Form SD reporting?
Well, I'll take the first shot at that. As we go through the Six Sigma phase and we go to the control phase, this is why we're looking at it a lens. It's procedural. So when we're in the first phase of measure, when we brought in consultants typically, we're looking for them to help us scope. We're looking for them to help us set up procedures. We're looking for them to contact our suppliers directly. We're looking for them to do our due diligence for us. As we get into the improve phase, we suddenly have the fact that it's the company itself that has to have these skills. And now as we're going to the control phase, probably in the next 2 years or so, we're finding that those consultants are not adding tremendous value to the system, and that, however, we still have to do the reporting. And let's face it, we want our conflict minerals compliance officers to provide us value in other areas of policy, procedures. We don't want them to do the clerical reporting skills. Let's give that to the technology and to the computer for going forward. Jack, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense what you said. In terms of that, what the consultants are able to do most is give you those extra hands you need at first. And eventually, you're trying to get to the point where the amount of work needed to maintain the program is minimal. And the best way to do that is keep it all in-house, and it keeps it consistent keep the company consistent in terms of the procedures. And eventually, only a few times a year, you'll need to update to standards changes, and however often you decide that you want to update and re-report on conflict minerals in your supply chain.
Thanks, Jack and John. So we have time for one more question. And this one, again, probably John can answer, but Jack can also come in on. How should I cost justify the adoption of conflict minerals reporting automation?
The traditional how shall I justify? And the first thing you all think about is hard versus soft dollars. What happens is hard dollars becomes the important question. And what we believe is that the cost is in such a way that you can justify with hard dollars the savings of the compliance staff for going forward. That is, the cost of automation is at such a price that it can easily be justified by saving a compliance manager's time going forward. But then there's another interesting area, which is the soft dollars. How do you look at reducing risk? How do you look at supporting your customers better than your competitors do? These are hard dollars to measure, but infrequently they are the major value that's added to the firm because of Conflict Minerals automation. Quite frankly, we've put together formats for justifying the cost in which we go through all the hard dollars and the soft dollar numbers, and it shows automation is always cost justifiable, even for very small companies going forward. Jack, anything you wanted to add to that?
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, at the end of the day, either you're going to have a lot of compliance officers have the choice of, do I go with an automation system or do I hire a new resource when they're looking at this? It's always cheaper to put in and implement a system than it is to go through the process of hiring, training, finding the right resource, and hoping that Conflict Minerals is what they want to do and they stick around so you don't have to retrain a new one.
Right. I see Rob's giving us a look
Yeah,
right there.
there's just, let me just ask one more that's come in at the end here. So this is the question/comment. I have now heard at least 3 times in your presentation that buyers need not buy from the DRC. There are conflict-free minerals that are coming out of Rwanda and DRC now, and these are coming through the ITSE chain. These minerals are not in conflict areas and are not funding armed groups. What needs to be emphasized is that there are CFSI certified smelters that are handling conflict minerals, especially tin and tantalum. Avoiding all materials from the DRC limits choices, especially in the case of tantalum. So the issue here is really the treatment of conflict minerals and thoughts on sourcing from that. Do you want to clarify that, John?
Yeah, this is a major issue going forward on Dodd-Frank, Section 1502. That is, what has been the damage done by having firms decide that they are not going to take any minerals from the DRC region, how they're going to avoid it totally, and what's been the impact going forward. That being said, the rules for reporting are still not going to be changed. That is, the reporting is still going to have to be done. And in fact, when we look at the firms we work with, the comments that have just been made are usually put in the comment section of the CMRTs, and they are followed on through the supply chain, and they should be attached in part of the information side of the supply chain management, what we call the information chain going forward. And they should be provided to each one of the actors in the supply chain and reported by the filers appropriately. But the basic point that's being stated here is we've got to put the information down and be able to put it down correctly. That's what's important. We got to do the reporting.
Okay, well, thank you very much. This has been an excellent presentation, and thank you for some really tough and excellent questions. We look forward to talking with you again. As John discussed at the beginning, we will make this available to you by tomorrow so that you will, while it's still hot on your mind. So thank you again. We appreciate your time, your taking the time, and your involvement in this.
And please feel free to follow up with any questions, comments. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Take care now.